I'm 71 years old now, and I've carried something inside me for 47 years that has eaten at my conscience every single day. In 1977, I found something in the earth that wasn't supposed to exist. Two somethings. A baby creature and its father, trapped in a collapsed mine shaft in the mountains of eastern Kentucky. What I did next, what I saw next, what the government did to silence it, this is the first time I've ever spoken about any of it. My name is Earl Whitmore. I was a coal miner for 31 years. I've seen cave-ins take good men. I've breathed enough black dust to kill 3 people, but nothing I experienced underground prepared me for what waited in that abandoned shaft on October 14th, 1977. This is the truth. And the truth, I've learned, is something certain people will do anything to bury. You have to understand what coal country was like back then to understand how this happened. Eastern Kentucky in the 70s was a maze of tunnels, official mines, unofficial mines, abandoned shafts going back 100 years that nobody had mapped in decades. The mountains were hollow, riddled with passages that connected in ways even the mining companies didn't fully understand. I was 24 years old, working for Harlan County Coal. Good pay, dangerous work. My father had been a miner. His father before him. It was what Whitmore men did. We went into the dark and brought out the black rock that kept America's lights on. But I was also what the company called a shaft walker. When old tunnels needed inspection, when abandoned sections needed assessment for potential reopening, they sent men like me, men who weren't afraid of the deep places, men who could read the rock and know if it was safe. October 1977. The company had purchased rights to an old mining claim up in the hollows near the Virginia border. The original mine had been abandoned in 1931 after a series of accidents. 46 years of sitting empty. They wanted to know if it was worth reopening. They sent me in alone. That was their first mistake. I remember the morning clearly. Cold fog in the hollows, the smell of rotting leaves. The mine entrance was almost invisible, overgrown with brush and half collapsed. I had to dig through debris just to find the opening. What I didn't know, what nobody knew, was that something else had found that entrance too. Something that had been using those tunnels for purposes I still don't fully understand. I was about to walk into the middle of a tragedy that had been unfolding in the darkness for 3 days. The first 2 hours were routine. I moved through the main shaft with my headlamp and equipment, checking support timbers, testing air quality, mapping the passages. The mine was in rough shape but structurally sound in most places. I made notes, took photographs, did my job. Then I heard it, a sound that stopped me cold in the darkness. It was a cry, high-pitched, wavering, desperate, coming from somewhere deeper in the mine, somewhere that shouldn't have held anything living. My first thought was that someone was trapped. Maybe a kid who'd wandered in exploring, maybe a homeless person who'd taken shelter. Either way, I had to investigate. But here's the thing that still haunts me. That cry didn't sound human. Not quite. It was close enough to trigger every protective instinct I had, but wrong enough to make the hair on my arm stand up. I followed it anyway. What else could I do? The sound led me through a series of branching tunnels, deeper into the mountain than my survey was supposed to go. My map became useless. I was in sections that hadn't been documented, passages that might have been natural caves connected to the mine workings. The air changed, warmer, wetter, smelling of something organic I couldn't identify. And then the cry came again, closer now, followed by another sound, a deep, rumbling vocalization, almost like a moan, almost like a word. I should have turned back. Every survival instinct I had was screaming at me to leave, to get help, to not go any further into the unknown alone. But that first cry, the high-pitched one, it sounded like a child in pain. I couldn't leave a child in pain, so I kept going. And 30 seconds later, my headlamp illuminated something that rewrote everything I thought I knew about the world. The passage opened into a natural cavern. Not large, maybe 30 feet across. The ceiling had partially collapsed on one side, creating a wall of rubble and broken timber that blocked what looked like another exit. And there, in the beam of my light, were two creatures I had no framework to understand. The larger one was pressed against the rubble, its massive body twisted at an unnatural angle. One of its legs was pinned under a boulder that must have weighed 1,000 pounds. It was covered in dark, reddish-brown hair. Its shoulders were broader than any man's. Its face, God. Its face was almost human. Heavy brow, flat nose, eyes that reflected my light with an amber glow. It was watching me. And in those eyes, I saw something I recognized: fear, pain, and desperate hope. The smaller creature was huddled against the larger one's side. It couldn't have been more than 3 feet tall. Its hair was lighter, almost auburn, and matted with dirt, and what I realized was dried blood. It was the source of the crying. A baby, a child, a baby Bigfoot, pressed against its trapped father, crying for help that hadn't come. For at least 10 seconds, none of us moved. I stood frozen, my headlamp the only light, my mind trying and failing to process what I was seeing. Then the baby made that sound again. That desperate, wavering cry. And its father, because that's what it was, I understood that instantly made a sound in response. Low, rumbling, reassuring. The way my own father used to comfort me when I was scared. That's when everything changed. That's when I stopped seeing monsters and started seeing a family in crisis. And that's when I made the decision that would define the rest of my life. What I did next goes against every piece of training I'd ever received. I set down my equipment. I raised my empty hands, and I walked toward them slowly, speaking in a calm, low voice. Easy. Easy now. I'm not going to hurt you. I can see you're trapped. I'm going to try to help. The father tensed. Even injured, even pinned, I could see the power in that body. If it decided I was a threat, it could probably kill me with one arm. But it didn't attack. It watched. It listened. And I swear, I will swear this until the day I die, it understood. I approached the boulder, pinning its leg. Even with my equipment, even with all my experience, I knew immediately that I couldn't move it alone. Not without help, not without machinery. But there was something I could do. The smaller rocks, the debris around the larger boulder. If I cleared enough of it, maybe, just maybe, I could create enough space for the creature to pull its leg free. I started working, moving stones, digging with my hands. The baby watched me with wide eyes that looked far too intelligent for an animal. The father watched too, its breathing ragged, its body trembling with what I realized was exhaustion and dehydration. "How long have you been down here?" I asked, not expecting an answer. The father raised one massive hand, 3 fingers extended. 3 days. They'd been trapped in this darkness for 3 days, and that's when I understood something that changed my entire perception of what these creatures were. They weren't animals. They were people. Different from us, yes, but people. And if I didn't help them, they were going to die. I worked for 6 hours. 6 hours of moving rocks by hand, of digging through rubble, of talking to keep them calm while I made inch-by-inch progress. The baby eventually stopped crying and started watching me with what I can only describe as curiosity. At one point, it reached out and touched my arm. Its hand was small, warm, and surprisingly gentle. The father never took its eyes off me. But somewhere around hour 3, something shifted. The fear in its expression faded, and when I stopped to drink from my canteen, it made a sound that I interpreted as gratitude. I offered water, poured some into my cupped hand, and held it out. The baby drank first, desperately, while its father watched. Then I refilled my hand for the father. It drank too, and the look in its eyes, I've never forgotten that look. Trust. Pure, vulnerable trust. By hour 6, I'd cleared enough debris to attempt extraction. "This is going to hurt," I told the father, the same way I'd tell any trapped miner. "I need you to pull when I say pull. Understand?" A nod. A deliberate, unmistakable nod. I wedged my pry bar under the edge of the boulder, positioned my body for leverage. counted to 3. Pull! Pull! The father screamed. A sound that echoed through the cavern and probably through half the mountain. The boulder shifted maybe 2 inches, and suddenly the leg was free. The creature collapsed backward, its breathing ragged, its injured leg bent at an angle that told me there were serious breaks. But it was free. I sat back on my heels, exhausted, covered in rock dust and sweat. The baby immediately crawled to its father, making soft sounds that were clearly meant to comfort. The father wrapped one massive arm around its child and held it close, and then it looked at me, raised its free hand, placed it over its chest, over its heart, and then extended it toward me. I didn't need a translator to understand. Thank you. What happened next is where the story gets complicated, where it gets dark, where the government comes in. I couldn't leave them there. The father couldn't walk. His leg was too badly damaged. The baby was weak from 3 days without food. If I left to get help, they might not survive. And even if they did, who would I bring? Who could I trust? Because I understood something else in those hours underground. These creatures had been hiding for a reason. If the world found out they existed, they'd be hunted, captured, dissected, turned into specimens and sideshow attractions. I'd just saved them from one death. I couldn't condemn them to another, so I made a choice. I told the mining company the shaft was structurally unsound, too dangerous to reopen. They accepted my assessment without question. I was their expert, after all. Then I went back that night, and the night after, and every night for the next 3 weeks. I brought food, medical supplies, splinting material for the father's leg. I learned that they could eat almost anything: meat, vegetables, roots, berries. The baby especially loved apples. I'd bring bags of them, and its eyes would light up in a way that was heartbreakingly human. The father healed faster than should have been possible. Within 2 weeks, it was putting weight on the leg. Within 3, it was walking with only a slight limp. During those 3 weeks, we developed a communication system. Simple gestures at first: yes and no. Hungry, thirsty, pain. Then more complex concepts: safe, danger, family, trust. The baby, I started calling it Little One, in my head, was endlessly curious. It would examine my flashlight, my boots, my watch. It learned that I made a specific sound when I was approaching so they wouldn't be startled. It started making that same sound back when it saw me coming. Our own little greeting. The father, I called it Gray, because of the gray streaks in its auburn hair never fully relaxed around me. But it tolerated me, allowed me to touch it when changing bandages, and once, when I tripped over a rock in the darkness, it caught me before I fell. Its reflexes were impossibly fast. Its strength was beyond anything I'd imagined, and yet it handled me like I was made of glass. These were not animals. These were intelligent beings with complex emotions, with family bonds, with the capacity for gratitude and trust, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that I was going to protect them no matter what it cost me. The 22nd day is when everything went wrong. I arrived at the mine entrance just after sunset, my usual time. But something was different. There were tire tracks in the mud that weren't mine. Recent ones. I approached carefully, my heart pounding. When I reached the cavern, I found it empty. No Gray, no Little One, just trampled ground, and this is what made my blood freeze: tranquilizer darts. 3 of them, scattered on the cavern floor. Someone had taken them. I searched frantically for any sign of where they'd gone, any indication of who had done this. And then I found it, wedged under a rock near the collapsed passage. A business card, plain white, no name, just 3 letters and a phone number: DPA. I didn't know what it meant then. I would learn. The Department of Primate Affairs, a division of the federal government that officially doesn't exist. Unofficially, they've been tracking and containing evidence of unknown primate species in North America since 1954. They'd found Gray and Little One. They'd taken them, and I had no idea where they'd gone. The next 6 months were the darkest period of my life. I made calls, asked questions, Tried to find anyone who knew anything about the creatures I'd befriended. Every lead went nowhere. Every inquiry was met with confusion, denial, or worse, silence. I was watched. That much I know for certain. Cars parked outside my house. Men in suits at the diner where I ate lunch. My phone developed strange clicks and echoes. Someone knew I was asking questions. Someone wanted me to stop, but I couldn't stop. Every night, I closed my eyes and saw a little one's face, heard its cry, remembered the way it had touched my arm with such innocent curiosity. What were they doing to it? Where had they taken it? Was it scared? Was it calling for help that wouldn't come? The guilt was suffocating. I'd saved them from that cave only to deliver them into something worse. Then, in April 1978, I received a visitor. His name was Martin Holt. He said he worked for agricultural research. But the way he carried himself, the way his eyes swept my living room, cataloging everything, he was government. High level. "Mr. Whitmore," he said, settling into my chair like he owned it. "You've been making inquiries about some animals that were recovered from a location in Harlan County last November." "They're not animals," I said, "and you know it." Holt smiled, a cold smile that didn't reach his eyes. "What I know, Mr. Whitmore, is that you've stumbled into something far bigger than you realize, something that the United States government has been managing very carefully for over 2 decades. Your interference, while well-intentioned, has created complications. Where are they? Safe, contained, being studied by people far more qualified than a coal miner. Studied. The word made me sick. They're intelligent. They understand language, emotions. They have family bonds. And you're treating them like lab specimens." Holt leaned forward. "Let me be very clear about something, Mr. Whitmore. The creatures you encountered represent a scientific discovery of immense importance. Their existence, if made public, would cause social upheaval on a scale you cannot imagine. Religious institutions would collapse. Scientific paradigms would crumble. There would be panic, hysteria, violence. So you keep them hidden. Keep them caged. We manage a situation that could otherwise become catastrophic. And we do so quietly, efficiently, without public knowledge. What do you want from me?" Holt reached into his briefcase and produced a document. "Your signature. A non-disclosure agreement with significant legal penalties for violation. In exchange, you'll receive a monthly stipend and guaranteed immunity from any charges related to your unauthorized activities in the mine." I looked at the document, looked at Holt, and asked the only question that mattered. "Can I see them?" For a moment, something flickered in Holt's expression. Surprise, maybe, or something else. "That's an unusual request. They trusted me. I saved their lives. The least you can do is let me know they're okay." Holt studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "One visit, supervised. And then you sign the agreement and never speak of any of this again. Deal." 3 weeks later, I was blindfolded and driven for what felt like hours. When the blindfold came off, I was standing in an underground facility that looked like something from a science fiction movie. Concrete corridors, fluorescent lights, security checkpoints with armed guards, and doors, dozens of doors leading to rooms I couldn't see inside. They took me to a viewing area, a window looking into a large enclosure that had been designed to look like natural forest. Trees, rocks, a small stream. All of it artificial, all of it underground. And there, in the center of the enclosure, were Gray and Little One. Gray looked different, thinner. Its eyes, when they swept the room, were dull in a way they hadn't been before. It moved slowly, without purpose, like something that had given up. Little One was worse. It sat in a corner, rocking slightly, making that cry I'd heard in the cave. The desperate, wavering sound of a child in distress. But now it was constant, unending, like it had been crying for months and couldn't stop. "What have you done to them?" I whispered. "We've provided them with food, shelter, and medical care," the scientist beside me said. His name was Dr. Werner. He spoke about the creatures the way someone might speak about particularly interesting bacteria. The adult has been cooperative in testing. The juvenile has been more challenging. They're dying, I said. Can't you see that? They're dying in there. Their physical health is excellent. All vital signs are not their bodies, their spirits, their souls, if you believe in such things. They're intelligent beings, and you've locked them in a prison. They're giving up. Dr. Werner looked at me with clinical detachment. You're anthropomorphizing, Mr. Whitmore, projecting human emotions onto their people. My voice cracked. Different from us, but people. And you're killing them. That's when Gray saw me. It had been staring at nothing, that dull emptiness in its eyes. But something about my voice, or my movement, caught its attention. It turned toward the viewing window, and when our eyes met, something changed. Recognition, memory, hope. Gray stood, moved toward the glass, placed one massive hand against it, right where my hand rested on the other side, and little one looked up, stopped crying, and made a sound I'll never forget. It said my name, not clearly, not the way a human would say it, but close enough. Earl. Its attempt at Earl. It remembered me. After 6 months in this hell, it remembered the man who had helped it in the darkness, and then it started crying again. But differently now. Reaching toward the glass, reaching toward me. I don't know exactly what happened in the following months. I was escorted out immediately after that encounter, made to sign the agreement, sent home with a check and a warning that my silence was expected permanently. But I couldn't forget what I'd seen, and I couldn't accept that those two beings would spend the rest of their lives in that underground prison. So I started planning. It took me 2 years. 2 years of careful preparation, of watching, of waiting. 2 years of pretending I'd accepted my silence money and moved on. I found allies, other people who'd encountered the creatures, who'd been silenced like me. We were scattered across the country, but we found each other, a network of witnesses who knew the truth and couldn't live with the cover-up. And we found something else, someone on the inside, a researcher named Sarah Chen, who had started to question what they were doing, who had started to see the creatures as I saw them, not as specimens, but as people. The plan came together slowly. A route out, a location to take them, resources to keep them hidden. On October 14th, 1980, exactly 3 years after I'd found them in that cave, we executed the extraction. I'm not going to detail how we did it. There are people still alive who could be prosecuted, methods that could be tracked. What I'll tell you is this: we got them out. Gray was weak. 3 years of captivity had taken an enormous toll. It could barely walk. Its eyes, once so intelligent and aware, were vacant and traumatized. Little one had grown. It was nearly 5 feet tall now, no longer a baby but still young, and the damage was even more apparent. It flinched at sudden movements. It didn't speak. Those rudimentary vocalizations it had learned had disappeared. It clung to its father constantly, terrified of everything. We took them to a location I'll never reveal. Deep wilderness, protected land, a place where they could heal, where they could be free, where no one would ever find them again. I stayed with them for 6 months, helping them readjust, watching Gray slowly regain strength and purpose, watching little one gradually emerge from its shell of trauma. The first time Gray walked into the forest under its own power, it stood among the trees for nearly an hour, just breathing, just existing in the wild world it had been stolen from. The first time little one laughed, actually laughed, a sound I'd never heard from it before. I sat down and cried. They were healing. Slowly, painfully, but genuinely healing. On my last day with them, Gray approached me. It moved differently now, stronger, more like the creature I'd first encountered, trapped but unbroken. It took my hand in both of its massive ones, looked into my eyes with that intelligence, that depth, that humanity, and it spoke. Not perfectly, not fluently, but clearly enough. Friend, Earl, Thank you. Always. I couldn't respond. My throat was too tight. Little one came next. No longer little taller than me now, though still young. It pressed its forehead against mine in a gesture I understood instinctively as profound affection. Then it said something I'll carry with me forever. Father says, "You are family. Always family." They disappeared into the forest that day. I watched them go until I couldn't see them anymore, until the trees had swallowed them completely. I never saw them again. The government searched. For months, for years, they searched. They questioned me, investigated me, monitored me. They knew I was involved, but could never prove it. Eventually, they stopped looking. The file was closed. The cover-up was completed, but they never found Gray and Little One. They never found the location I'll never reveal. They never recaptured the creatures they'd tried to turn into specimens. I'm 71 years old now. I've lived a quiet life since then. Never married. Who could I explain my past to? Never had children. The risk of surveillance was too high. I've watched the world from a distance, keeping my secret, keeping my promise. But lately, I've been receiving signs. Deep in the woods near my property, woods that connect, eventually, to those endless wilderness areas where I helped Gray and Little One disappear. I've found things. Footprints, arranged stones, and once, an apple left on my porch. Little One loved apples. I used to bring bags of them. I think they're still out there. I think they remember. I think, sometimes, they come to check on the man who saved them twice, once from a cave, once from a cage, and that gives me hope. For them, for us. For what it says about the capacity of different beings to connect across the vast gulf of difference. This is why I'm telling this story now, because what happened to Gray and Little One matters, not just for them, but for all of us. If these creatures exist, and they do, I've touched them, spoken with them, loved them, then everything we think we know about our world is incomplete. We share this planet with another intelligent species, one that has been hiding from us, and with good reason. We have hunted them, captured them, imprisoned them, treated them as objects to be studied rather than beings to be respected. What does that say about us? And here's the harder question. If there are others, and I believe there are, what should we do about it? The government's answer is containment, secrecy, and control. Study them, hide them, never let the public know. I believe there's a better way. Coexistence, protection, recognition. That intelligence and dignity aren't unique to humans, but that requires something radical. Admitting that our worldview is wrong. Admitting that there are wonders in this world we've refused to see. Admitting that the creatures we've called monsters are something far more important, their family. Last month, I hiked into those woods for what might be the last time. My body's failing. My heart's not what it used to be. The doctors say I should take it easy. Right, but I had to know. One more time. I had to see if my family was still out there. I walked for hours, through old-growth forest that hasn't been logged in a century, past landmarks I recognized from 40 years ago, and then I found it, a clearing, a circle of stones, and in the center, arranged carefully, deliberately, 3 objects: an apple core, recently eaten, a worn piece of cloth that might once have been part of my jacket, and a stone, polished smooth, with a symbol carved into it. 2 figures, one large, one small, standing beside a third figure. Smaller than them. Different. But clearly part of the group, family. I sat in that clearing for hours, holding that stone, crying and laughing and remembering. They were out there. They remembered, and across 40 years and impossible distance, they'd found a way to tell me, we are still family. We will always be family. I'm going to die soon. I can feel it. The weight of years, the toll of secrets kept, the strain of a life lived in hiding. But before I go, I want the world to know the truth. These creatures exist. They are intelligent, emotional, and worthy of respect. They have families. They love their children. They form bonds that transcend species. And somewhere in the wilderness of this country, a father and child I saved 47 years ago are still living free, still remembering, still keeping our connection alive in ways I'll never fully understand. What happened in that mine shaft in 1977 changed my life. What happened in that government facility changed my soul. And what happened when I helped them escape, that redeemed everything. I have no regrets, none at all, because some truths are worth more than comfort. Some bonds are worth more than safety. And some families, the ones we choose, the ones that choose us, are worth everything we have to give. My name is Earl Whitmore. I found a baby Bigfoot and its father trapped underground 47 years ago. I freed them from a cave. I freed them from a cage, and I've spent my life protecting the secret of their existence. This is my confession. This is my legacy. This is the truth. To Gray and Little One, wherever you are, thank you for trusting me when you had no reason to trust, for teaching me what family really means, for showing me that intelligence and love exist in forms we never imagined. I hope the forest has been kind to you. I hope your family has grown. I hope, somewhere in those endless wild spaces, you've found the peace you deserved all along. And if you ever come back to that clearing, back to that circle of stones, know this: I kept my promise. I kept your secret, and I'll carry our bond with me into whatever comes next. Always family. Always.